Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Conversations at the Danforth Center. My name is Tim Halls, and I am chairman of the Danforth Center's Friends Committee. Now, whether you're here in person or attending virtually, whether this is your first time here or your 40th, I'm so glad you could join us for our program tonight. And tonight's conversation is about agriculture. In fact, it's about the future of food and food security. And we are very fortunate to have with us three leading-edge scientists who are leading us into this future. We have Dr. Chaputin, we have Professor Miano, and we have Dr. Taylor. And you'll meet them and hear a little bit about them in a bit. Now, before we begin, I'd like to thank our Friends Committee for their ongoing dedication and support of this series. And I'd also like to thank our media partner, HEC Media. And speaking of them, tonight's program is being recorded. You can watch it next Sunday night on HEC TV at 5 p.m. And then every Saturday morning at 7 a.m. and every Sunday night at 5 through the end of May, they will rerun the program. Now, if you are inspired by what you learned tonight, then please come back. You can go to our website at danforthcenter.org and hear about future events, meet our scientists, learn about the science being done here. You can also come back for a tour of the facility or get involved in other ways. And as I believe most of you know, the Danforth Center is a not-for-profit organization, and we depend on the generosity of folks like yourselves. Now I get the pleasure of introducing tonight's moderator, Dr. Benjamin Akande. Dr. Akande is a Nigerian-born American citizen. He is an economist. He has been the president of 2 colleges, and he is currently senior vice president at Stifel Financial here in St. Louis. Oh, but wait, there's more. He is also the chairman of the Danforth Leadership Council. That's quite a resume. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the podium over. Dr. Akande, please take it away.
Tim, what an introduction. I think I wrote that, didn't I? Good evening, everybody. It is an honor to be here and to welcome you to Nourishing Our Future. You know, food security is a condition in which people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food. This is food that meets their dietary needs and preferences for all active and healthy lives. But food security is closely linked to national security. A nation's ability to ensure adequate and reliable food is important to its population. It's also essential to maintaining stability, social cohesion, and economic development. But one thing is certain, and that one thing is that without food security, we often witness social unrest, political instability, conflict, making food security a critical component of national security. Tonight, we are honored to have with us a very, very esteemed group of panelists convened by the Danforth Center that will address food security from various lenses. And then once we finish our conversation, the final 15 minutes or so will be reserved for your questions. And so allow me to introduce to you our distinguished panelists. I start with Dr. Sahara Moon Champlin. She is Executive Director of the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research based in Washington, D.C. She is a plant scientist who is passionate about the role of agriculture and research in solving today's many challenges. She has worked previously for the U.S. Botanic Garden and the U.S. Agency for International Development. Welcome, Sahara Moon. It brings me great pleasure to introduce our next panelist, Professor Douglas Watuku Miano. He is Professor of Plant Pathology at the University of Nairobi in Kenya, and he's come all the way from Kenya to be with us tonight. You know, Professor Miano is an accomplished scholar, and he's also the head of the Virus-Resistant Cassava for Africa project, which is based in Kenya. We'll hear more about this project in just a moment. And you'll also notice that we refer to him as professor because you see in Africa and to some extent in Europe, the title of professor is earned. You know, you get the PhD and then you work for many, many years to earn that remarkable title. Well, he's achieved a lot and he continues to achieve. And we're glad you're here with us tonight, Professor. Our next panelist is really one of our own, Dr. Nigel Taylor, the Dorothy J. King Distinguished Investigator at the Danforth Plant Life Center. He's a leading expert on cassava and a pioneer in the special techniques that first allowed cassava to be improved using modern methods. I underscore pioneer because pioneering is a very distinguished responsibility because you're creating what does not exist and trying to move the science forward in many ways. And that's exactly what Dr. Taylor has done. He's the international head of Virus-Resistant Cassava for Africa project. I want to thank Nigel for being here, and I want to thank our panelists as well for being here tonight. Let's talk nourishing our future. You know, I want to start off the conversation by going directly to the very important nature of cassava. You know, as a young lad growing up in Nigeria, I realized very early in my life the importance of cassava in terms of nutrition and just my daily bread. And whether it was breakfast, whether it was lunch, whether it was dinner, and in some instances for dessert, it was all linked to cassava. And it kept us going, it fed us, it kept us strong. And so when people talk about cassava, for me, it's not a distant conversation. It's the very essence of life. And without it, the 200 million people in my native country of Nigeria are deprived of a very important nutrient that keeps them alive. And so with that said, I want to start our conversation by asking the question, and I'm going to focus on Professor Miano on this one. And for those who are not familiar with cassava, Professor, would you describe what this crop is all about and its importance in Kenya and by extension, the rest of the African continent? Prof?
Yeah, thank you, Benjamin, for the question. Cassava is a tropical crop that is mainly grown for its starch. It's consumed by about 600 million people in the world, but majority of these are in Africa, in Latin America, and in Asia. Specifically, it's for an African crop. Nigeria is the leading producer of cassava, and most parts of the Western Africa, they grow cassava, and a lot of also East Africa, including Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Congo, Mozambique, the whole of the East Africa region, they depend on cassava. And as you have said, rightly said, that in majority or quite a substantial number of people, they will eat cassava in every day. There are some regions in Kenya, especially where cassava is grown in Kenya, like the coast region and the western region neighboring to Uganda. The western region, people will not spend a day without eating cassava in one way or in one form or the other. So it's really an important crop, a highly climate resilient crop that is also adapted to the fact that there is climate change. So it's a crop that is actually for the future because it is able to survive when the environment is not so favorable and the moisture conditions are not as high as needed by other crops like corn, what we call maize in the region. So it's a very important crop in the region, very important in Kenya, very important in Africa, and also other parts of the world.
You emphasize its importance, and there's a real appreciation for that, but then it begs the question that it faces some significant challenges, both for farming and other consequences. Could you speak to that?
Yes, and one of the main constraints to cassava production is diseases. And there are two main diseases that affect cassava. There is one that affects the leaves, the growing part of the plant that produces takes the photosynthesis and produces the starch that is stored in the roots, because the roots are the main food source. Some people eat the leaves, and I think that there is a photograph that shows the roots, which is the main part of the crop that is consumed. And so one disease affects the upper part, the leaves. So that means that the production of starch that is stored in the roots is affected if the leaves are affected. That's the number one disease. We call it cassava mosaic disease. There's a second disease that is cassava brown streak disease. It is expressed in every part of the plant, but it is most seen and affects mainly the storage roots, which is the main part that is eaten. So that can make the crop to be totally lost. And the unfortunate bit is that you may not see it when it is growing. You can only know when you are coming to harvest. So that means that cassava takes about 12 months to grow on average, and you've spent a whole year growing a crop, and then when you go to harvest, you find that you have nothing because it has been destroyed. So those are the main ones, although there are many other factors that also affect cassava. Of course, every crop will require some moisture. So if the moisture levels are a bit low, then that means that production is low. So whatever science we come with must also address such issues. We have other stresses like the insects, but the main ones are when the cassava is growing, it's mainly the diseases. Along the chain, you may have other challenges like marketing, the production of high-quality seeds, because that's cassava is mainly grown or the seeds are produced in an informal setup. So establishing a good seed system is also key in terms of coming up with a good system of cassava production.
I like the fact that you emphasize the seed aspect of this, because it leads to my next question for Dr. Taylor, because you lead Verka Plus internationally. Could you tell us, Dr. Taylor, what does Verka mean? And what does the project hope to achieve? And what progress are being made so far? Dr. Taylor?
So thank you. As you introduced at the beginning, Verka stands for Virus-Resistant Cassava for Africa project. And that was initiated here at the Danforth Center in about 2000, in its present form, about 2008. It's a partnership with Professor Miano at the Kenyan Agricultural Research System, also with the Agricultural Research System in Uganda and in Rwanda. So that's the equivalent of the USDA in each of these countries. And these are the partnerships that we built up. And the goal of the Verka project, and I think we can see some pictures up here, is to develop cassava and deliver, really, really important, develop and deliver cassava with robust resistance to the virus diseases that Professor Miano has just described. And you can see here behind me the brown root. That is what cassava brown streak does to the storage root. You cannot eat that. You cannot sell it. You cannot feed it to your animals. You cannot do anything with it. We started off, this was the status of cassava being impacted by cassava brown streak disease in Kenya and elsewhere in East Africa. The other route to that our collaborator is holding is a product developed by the Verka project. Those two roots come from different plants grown in the same field for 12 months. You can see 100% loss over here on the brown one, and on the enhanced one that is a product of our collaboration and of the technology we developed here at the Danforth Plant Science Center. That has been in the ground, same field, same disease pressure. So this is what we developed here at the Danforth Center. It's a technology that really, really works. We've been doing these field trials now for more than 10 years, more than 30 field trials in Kenya, Uganda, and now in Rwanda, and the technology is holding up really well. So the technology, called RNAi, a little bit like immunizing the plant against the virus, is really, really working, and we're extremely enthusiastic about that. And that fires up the team. And when I hear from Yano, when they've been to the field and they've harvested again down by Mombasa, this is where this picture was taken last February. And the enthusiasm that you see in people's faces is like, whoa, this can really make a difference.
You know, you've traversed the very important challenge of coming up with a solution to address this virus. But then there's another obstacle. And that obstacle is essentially, what are the major obstacles for delivering this enhanced virus-resistant cassava, not just to farmers, but just embracing the acceptability of this new breed? What are the obstacles, but more importantly, what are we doing about it?
So right now, this is a GM product, so we have to go through all of the regulatory approval process. We're a large way through that, large part due to Professor Miano and his colleagues, and it's been approved by the Kenyan the National Biosafety Authority as safe for food, feed, and the environment. We're now in national performance trials, last stages of the regulatory process that then allows us to register the variety and then deliver it to the farmer. You can see as well, we're calling this Kinga Ku. That's the branding that we're developing. Kinga Ku stands for, in Swahili?
Kinga is shield. Ku is a big shield. Ku is big. Yeah, so it's a big shield. And
the KUU stands for Kenya, Uganda, and United States.
Okay. Yeah.
So we built that in as well. So this is going to be, we developed what we hope are maybe half a dozen varieties that can be released to farmers once we've been through the national performance trials and we get variety registration. And then the piece is, how do we deliver these to the farmer? We have these varieties that are performing really, really well. How do you get that out to 700,000 farmers in Rwanda, for example, or in Kenya? How do you deliver? And that's the piece that we're developing now.
Is there a timeline for this? Because I know when you're dealing with government, you're dealing with bureaucracy, you're dealing with the challenges that come with that. But have you set an aggressive timeline that gives us a chance to see what that future looks like?
We've always been really reticent or conservative in giving timelines. If we can continue the way we are, we should have variety registration next year, and we are planning for product launch next year as well.
Okay.
Latter half, fourth quarter of next year, product launch.
Okay.
Which would be to a small number of farmers at the beginning, and then as we build what we're calling the seed system, which is the delivery system to get out to 10,000 farmers, 50, 100, 200. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Dr. Chapperton, you are the leader of the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, often referred to with the acronym FAR. I like that. And when you think about it, your organization is really anchored on food security. Absolutely. Please tell us about the work of FAR and why it's important when it comes to agricultural research and the role that you're playing in protecting food security globally.
Thank you. Thanks. It's wonderful to be here. Wonderful to hear about the Cassava project. I've watched it with much interest over the years. So as you noted, I work at FAR, the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. We are an organization that was launched 10 years ago. We were created coming out of the 2014 Farm Bill and given a mandate to form public-private partnerships to support food and agriculture research. And this was really something that came out of Congress. And they gave us this very unique requirement that for every dollar of taxpayer money we receive through the Farm Bill, we have to match it with a non-federal dollar. And the wisdom of this was that it took that federal public investment, and we used that investment to leverage additional resources out of private sector companies, foundations, nonprofits, and others who join us in really creating these partnerships to invest in research that, as you noted, is critical to food security. My organization funds research ranging from crop improvement, like we've been talking about just now, to animal science and diseases, looking at how to make agriculture more sustainable and reduce its impact on the environment, and consider how to build healthier food systems, both to deliver healthier foods to consumers, but also to ensure that the food system that delivers that food is functional and healthy. And through our work, we have a direct impact on food security and on sustainability. And although we often focus on issues here in the United States shares agricultural challenges and food security challenges with the rest of the world. And we're always looking to elevate those priorities that we can solve, those challenges that we can solve through food and agriculture research and have an impact that is global in nature.
What are some of the examples of funded research that FAR has been engaged in over the years, both in the United States and around the world?
So I believe in bringing the power of global science to bear on challenges that we face here in the United States and globally. And FAR has had a long history of partnering with researchers all over the world and tapping into that. Agriculture is really a global field, and science doesn't stop at the borders of one country. And so over the years, we have funded, I think, some of the work we've done that really has the most global impact is our work in crop improvement. And if you think of a farmer in Kansas growing wheat, and you think of a farmer in the Punjab in India also growing wheat, they're both facing a world that is becoming hotter. And so if we can unlock the power of genetics and find a trait to increase heat tolerance and allow that farmer to grow the wheat and improve their productivity even as temperatures rise, we're going to be helping those farmers. That germplasm can be put into varieties that are grown in Kansas, and it can be put in varieties that are grown across South Asia, for example. So our crop improvement, I think, is a way that we can really leverage the power of research to have a tremendous impact on farmers, whether they grow hundreds of thousands of acres or whether they grow food on half a hectare. That's, I think, the power of seeds. But it doesn't stop there. We have an initiative called Ag Mission, which really looks to help farmers adapt to climate change and looks to mitigate the impact of agriculture on climate change and has as its goal net zero emissions. And so that project has brought partners together from across industry. Our two big industry partners in Ag Mission are PepsiCo and McDonald's. They're joined by the Nature Conservancy, so you can see right there the power of the partnership. You have a major conservation organization pairing up with two major companies, and we're also joined by the World Farmers Organization, which is an entity that represents farmers from across the world. And together, we are looking at research that really helps farmers to prepare for, gives them the decision tools they need, helps them adopt the technologies that allow them to grow their crops in the face of a changing climate, and also looks at things like soil carbon sequestration and how farmers are adopting technologies so that we can really zero in on approaches to mitigate climate change.
Wow. When we think about food security and its impact, I think most people think about food security simply shipping food to the places where they are needed or places that are at risk of hunger and malnutrition. That seems to me to be quite straightforward. So if that's the case, why do we need to pursue plant science and agricultural research to address these challenges? I want to throw that question to the three panelists did, and I want to start off with Professor Miano. Why do we need to invest our resources and our time and efforts in plant science? Why?
Thank you, Benjamin. I think this is a fundamental question because food is a right to every human being. And in the right quantities and of high nutrition, the nutrition that is needed. And if it's possible, everyone should be able to produce. If they are the farmers, they should be able to produce enough for themselves and for the communities that are around them. And they shouldn't necessarily be getting food aid from other sources. The other thing why science is important is because there are new challenges that are coming every time, and we need science to solve these problems. So when you look at it from that angle, then everyone anywhere in the world should have the opportunity, the challenges that they are facing, now that we have available science from different parts of the world, there should be a way of making sure that everyone is able to solve those problems, to feed themselves, and to produce enough for economic security so that they can not only feed themselves, but they can be able to do other things, take their children to school, and build schools, build hospitals, and all that. So it's critical for us to make sure that everybody is food secure because the world becomes safer when everybody is able to produce their own food.
Thank you. Nigel, can you look at this same question from the perspective of the Danforth Plant Life Science? Why?
Sorry, Benjamin, can you say that again, please?
I'm asking the same question as it relates to what Professor Miano has answered. What is the role of the Danforth Plant Life Center in addressing this particular issue? Why are we investing our time and resources in doing this?
Well, I mean, we were talking earlier, 80% of people in Kenya still farm.
Yes.
So, and I'm glad you touched on it as well. It's not just about food security, it's about economic security. People, these farmers want to process the food, the women will process it, sell it locally, income for the family, and develop these products, cassava, and it's what we're focusing on to become industrial crops for income. So if we're going to have an impact, in my opinion, as the Danforth Plant Science Center, there are 80% of the world's population living in the developing South and other countries such as that. That's where we have to have an impact. And we can learn, we can do so much, we're learning so much here in the Midwest. Our agriculture is highly efficient. We've seen the impact that technology can have there. From my point of view, we have to make sure that impacts other people in the world.
And we're having that impact.
We're starting to have that impact, yes. And it's fantastic to be part of that.
How do you see it from the perspective of FAR, in terms of that impact that we're speaking? You know, what is the perspective of FAR to addressing this major issue from the plant science aspect?
So agriculture research is one of the most impactful investments you can make. The US Department of Agriculture estimated that for every $1 invested in agriculture research, we've seen $20 in benefit to the US economy. That's incredibly powerful. And if you look internationally at the broader context and you look back at history, countries that invested in their agriculture sector developed and saw huge gains in their economy. And both this, my fellow speakers here just addressed this, how investing in agriculture and investing in research in particular really has those spillover benefits for people. And so at FAR, I see that even though we're here in the United States and we don't have 80% of our population working as farmers today, the United States was an agrarian economy and is based on an agrarian history. And so many people today still work in the food sector and work in fields touched by agriculture. And of course, consume the food that agriculture produces. And by investing in the research, we can ensure that the foods that people need to be healthy, because simply getting enough calories, as we all know, is not enough, that when we invest in that research, we can generate the foods that people need to be healthy. We can ensure that it's accessible. We can do the research on how to provide food to people in a way that they can afford and that they can access. And then they can use, busy parents coming home from a day after work need food in a certain way that they can prepare it quickly for their families and still put healthy food on the table. And research can contribute to all of that.
I like the way you've taken research and moved it to the importance of healthy lives and then the consequent impact on survival. Mm-hmm. When I think about cassava and I think about its impact, I ask the question, take it away. Allow the viruses to decimate that crop. And what you're looking at is a significant portion of society, as we know it, will be gone. And so if I was to ask the question, if there was one thing that you wish people knew, that the majority of us knew, that we don't know now about the work and the good work that you're doing, what is that one thing that you would like to emphasize and to articulate as it relates to the work that you're doing? I'll start with Nigel.
Again, we were talking about this earlier. I think it's staying the course. These projects take a long time to develop the technology and then to deliver. It's kind of somewhat similar to a new pharmaceutical product. You have the technology at the beginning, the testing, proof of concept, translation, regulation, and then all the delivery components. So we've been doing this since, as I said, since about 2008. We're getting close to delivering, but that's a significant amount of time. And you have to stay the course. And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, USAID, have been amazing to keep funding us for this period of time. And the Danforth Plant Science Center is a special place because it has remained committed to this type of work, to see something through this period. Very easy to bail out halfway through. Say we publish some papers. We trained 6 PhD students. But if we're going to have an impact, you've got to stay the course. And it takes time and commitment.
Okay.
I think I would love for people to understand the degree to which science has delivered the food that they go and get at their grocery store every day. When you think of the threats of pests and diseases for crops or animals, scientists and plant breeders and animal science are in a race against the next virus, the next fungus, the next pest that will come through. And one of the things my organization does that I'm so proud of is our rapid response grants. If you've ever applied for funding from the USDA and they do phenomenal work, you know that it's not a rapid process. If there's a new disease that's emerging and you're trying to get out ahead of it, you want to be able to get that research funding and get started before it even reaches the crop. And that's one of the programs that FAR funds, is a rapid response program for emerging pests and diseases. And through that, researchers can come to us, and in very quick time, we commit to turning around the review of their proposal, and we provide a modest amount of funding, but it allows them to sometimes even begin doing that research before a new pest or disease that we know is on the horizon that might be coming from outside the United States arrives here. And through that, we funded research on lettuce viruses, on cattle ticks, on weevils, and recently a project in Hawaii where coffee is grown in Hawaii, and it was seen that there was a new coffee leaf rust that was moving through Latin America and was expected to arrive in Hawaii. And they got an award from us to, right as it was arriving there, to head it off and to do the diagnostics they needed to prepare the coffee growers in Hawaii to be able to maintain their livelihoods in advance of this new threat. So I guess it's that it's not like you can just sort of solve the problem and move on. This is a problem that we will always be engaging with, and science has delivered the food that you eat every day, all the time.
I like the way you all were able to focus on the fact that you knew it was coming, and so there was a sense of constructive impatience to ensure that when it does arrive, you're waiting for it, and that in essence will probably save lives and, more importantly, save the crop for many years to come. Professor, what is that one thing
Yeah, thank you. I think one thing that is important to understand is the value of partnerships, the value of collaboration, because bringing up a team that is able to look through the whole process and start from the beginning and see the end and go through all that process. And that requires consistent funding. It requires people being able to interact over a long period of time. And what we have gained from the partnerships, the North-South, the South-South partnerships, has helped us to move quite a bit. Because what we didn't have, for example, in our region, we were able to get it from Danforth Center and other partners that we've worked together. So that partnership, together with funding, is critical to deliver a product, and especially when you're dealing with public institutions which are not private, because private might be using their own funding from the profits they're making. But when you're dealing with public research, you need to have that partnership. You bring all the people, the experts from different parts, and bring them together into a team that can be able to work together and deliver a product. It takes teamwork. It takes more than one institution. It takes more than one person. It takes more than one profession. And we are a big team of almost all experts to reach where we have come from. So it has taken work. And that work needs to be, it needs a team that is consistently working towards a common goal.
Thank you. You know, we promised you that we would have some time for the audience to submit their questions. Well, we want to start with the questions that were submitted during the registration, and then mixing questions from your submitted cards. And so let's dive right in. I'm going to start out with Dr. Chapaton, particularly, why should the private sector be engaged in addressing food security issues? That's the first question from our audience to you.
That's a great question. I'll start off by saying the private sector, I think, is actively engaged. And through the many investments that they make in improving crop varieties, for example, that they provide to farmers. But I think this question is perhaps, why should the private sector really engage with the public sector? And why should we have these public-private partnerships? And I look at it from both angles, right? Like the funding that I have from Congress allows my organization to leverage funding from the private sector. Sometimes it's an investment that the private sector may have already made, but by bringing it into a public-private partnership, the outcomes of that research are brought into the public sector and are broadly available and can be more directly applied to addressing food security issues, including in countries outside of the United States. But I think if you look at it from the private sector viewpoint, I think there are some very compelling reasons to address food security. One is very basic. If people have the agriculture technologies they need, they will have better livelihoods. And a person with the means to have a good livelihood is also a consumer. So there's sort of an impact on the economy there. But I think right now, many private companies are really grappling with how can they ensure that their company is delivering a benefit to the environment, that they are reducing the impact of their supply chains, of the foods that they're purchasing to put into their products. Consumers are demanding this. Public is demanding healthier food and more sustainable food. And so I think companies are really finding that they not only do they need to be, they want to be, I don't know which one it is, I think it's both. But in order to really deliver what consumers are asking for, they need to ensure that they are delivering healthy foods in a way that is sustainable. And to me, that's one of the most compelling reasons why they can invest in research, is because of the benefits that research delivers. They can make that upfront investment, partnering with the public sector organizations like myself or universities or the Danforth Center, and ensure that they are helping to develop the technologies that farmers will need to grow the crops more sustainably so that they can purchase those products and put them in their products.
Thank you. Professor Miano, when you think about that sense of sustainability and empowerment of scientists in Kenya, how do you ensure that eventually there will be self-sufficiency when it comes to scientists in Kenya so that they can take this ball and run with it. What do you envision there? That was the second question we had from our panelists.
Yeah, so I think one of the things is that the governments will have to realize that they have to contribute also substantially to funding for research, because any economy that currently must be driven by science, and science can only be developed through research, so there has to be participation of the government. The other thing is consistency also from other donors, so that then the scientists, even in the, for example, in the regions, the tropics, are also able to continually be able to continue doing the work. I think Nigel has brought up that issue of consistency, because imagine, for example, if like a project was only funded for the first phase, we develop the good transgenic materials, and then we don't get funds from anywhere else. And so after those years that we've been working, we could have done one project and finish up with it and go to another one. So I think the governments must make sure that there is consistency in funding research in agriculture especially, and also other people who are participating in the research work, the donors, needs to also realize that without that consistency, then the people there may not be able to go far. And of course, collaborations, I would also still continue in saying that the partnerships with others will help in terms of advancing the sciences as they are going, capacity building in terms of training the younger people as the older people are taking other responsibilities. What you realize is that, especially in Africa, by the time you reach where we are already taken up to go and take other administrative work just because of the virtue of the training and what you have gone through. So the younger people have to be enticed to come and continue doing research, and also we build enough facilities for the work to continue on. Thank you.
You talk about philanthropy as a driving force to enable the development of the virus resistance that we've been able to push forward from the Danforth Plant Life Center. Dr. Taylor, the question we have there is that, how do you move forward? I mean, what I'm really just sort of very impressed with is the level of commitment from donors, private citizens, individuals that don't even consume cassava. I want you to understand how big that is, okay? Because, they don't consume cassava, but they get it. They appreciate its importance. They appreciate its vitality. Moving forward, what do we need to do from here?
Well, I'll address that from the point of view of the delivery component and that transition from philanthropic donors to the private sector. So our model for the delivery system, how we're going to actually deliver this to the farmer, will be based on public-private, actually as much as we can, private sector driven initiatives. And that is what I mean. That is, there will be for-profit companies involved in propagating our materials. And we're now actively training lead farmers in the villages in Kilifi County and in Alupe in Kenya. Often these are women, and these are the lead farmers. They will be growing our cassava. They will get microloans from us, matching loans to do this. They'll have business training, everything they need. They will grow the materials, and they will harvest them and sell them to the local farmers. And the business model there, this is a proven business model. It's working in Tanzania and Nigeria for cassava, that this will be a self-sustaining economic system. So that means, remember, I think people are making and enhancing their livelihoods all the way down this chain. So it's not just the technology and the biology that we've done, but how that can enhance people's well-being. It also means that it's self-sustaining economically. We can say, thank you very much. And I'm looking at my ex-colleague, Mark Halsey, who said, we've done our job. Thank you very much. We can now pull back. We will still support at the science level. Are the plants still performing? Are they still free of virus? But the system is self-sustaining, and it does not need us anymore, and it will not need input from the philanthropic donors. That's our vision, our goal.
That's the vision.
Yep.
I think we have another question from our audience. I'm going to take the one to Dr. Chapleton here, and the question basically is, how is FAR positioned to handle urgent crises like COVID and other threats of crop and food security? Because we know that what COVID did was it created a significant interruption. Are you ready? Are you prepared for the next pandemic?
I'm still getting over the last one. I don't know if I'm ready for another one. But, so I joined FAR just a year and a half ago, but I think FAR actually was very responsive during the first pandemic. And I think that the very nature of how we work, right? We are not a government agency, we're a nonprofit. We can be nimble, we can be flexible in our granting arrangements. I mentioned our rapid response program for emerging pests and diseases. That's one of the ways in which we can very quickly and nimbly pivot to the challenge that perhaps no one was expecting. During the COVID pandemic, we did a series of grants called Tipping Points, where we looked at what was needed to deliver food in cities given the supply shortages and the access issues that people were having with lost incomes and so forth. And did those grants very quickly and set them up in a number of different cities. And that was very important research. And we learned a lot about how food reaches people in emergencies. Here in the United States, there were serious food security issues. And findings related to how the response organizations in a city are working together and the benefits that provided to how food can reach people. And looking at the impacts of other social and community services on people and how when those services are working together, then that also helps people to access food. So you don't think of that as food and agriculture research. This is really social science research or research on systems, city systems and how they work. But by taking that lens of how does a city's system allow it to overcome supply chain shortages and get food to people who are in need quickly, we can learn a lot. And we've now seen that other cities are looking to that research and considering how they can apply it in their own situation so that they are prepared for the next pandemic.
Thank you. Our next question is for Dr. Taylor. And the question is that how should we work to educate the public, both in the United States and in other countries, that where there is the most need, and most importantly about the potential for improved crops? What is the best avenue to do that?
Well, I think occasions like this, for one. I think we talked about this a lot. I think educating scientists and young scientists to communicate the work that they're doing better, not at the technical level, but engaging people about the excitement of working in plant science, the technologies that we have, the potential that we have. So I think it's about enhancing our communication skills as scientists is one thing I think we need to keep working on.
And we're making that progress. It's just great to know that. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank our audience for all the questions and then also to thank our panelists for their wonderful insight. I hope that you've been inspired tonight by what you've heard this evening. But before we close it up, I want to invite Jim Carrington, President and CEO of the Danforth Plant Life Center, to come up and to give us some closing remarks. Dr. Carrington.
Well, you know who would have liked this program? Phil Needleman. So most of you, probably everyone who knew Phil, knows that he passed away this past Monday. Phil was a director on our board for 18 years. He was actually my predecessor. He was the interim president in 2010, just before we came. And he was a big believer in the science and the Danforth Center, the science that we were doing, and he would have been really proud to hear this tonight. Phil believed in basic science, understanding how things work. We wouldn't have a VRCA project if we didn't have scientists who figured out how RNAi worked. It's a fundamental mechanism. He was a big believer in applying that knowledge and doing something good. We wouldn't have the VRCA project without that concept. It's great to learn things and do science that makes a scientist feel great because, hey, look what I found. But it doesn't make the world a better place. It's only when you bring partners together, like we have in the VRCA project. And it's only when agencies like USAID and foundations like FAR and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and other supporters, institutions and individuals like we have here, support it. This doesn't happen on its own. And in the end, it's not gonna, this VRCA project isn't gonna yield anything unless we have entrepreneurs that can figure out how to sustain it economically. This is now, as you've heard tonight, a growing emphasis of the VRCA project. Phil would have liked every aspect of this program tonight. He used to say, I'm going to work hard to get through this. He used to say, show me how you're going to bring this to market, and I want to see it done in my lifetime, and I am old. So I'm really happy to know that Phil saw a lot of impact here at the Danforth Center, and I'm very disappointed that Phil won't be there when you bring it over the finish line. In Kenya first, Uganda eventually, and Rwanda and other geographies. But you can be there, and we hope that you'll stay with us. So I want to conclude by giving my sincere thanks and appreciation to my friend Miano, fellow virologist and scientist in Nairobi, Sahara, who's done much more than she led on to tonight in supporting science here in the United States, and Nigel for his leadership and his role as my colleague, which I enjoy. And then finally, Benjamin, thank you so much for guiding the conversation. Benjamin does more than you know for the Danforth Center, and we're thrilled to have you with us. Enjoy the rest of the evening, have a safe drive home, and we'll see you again.